Welcome back to another MOTOBOB video where today we're going to be looking at the most exciting new sports bikes on the market for 2022. Now we've done the retros, the adventure bikes, touring bikes, nakeds, and I usually go in price order to add a little drama to proceedings, but this one, it truly does get a bit out of control. So I'd advise you get someone else to look after your credit card for the next 10 minutes or so while we look at some proper bike porn. But before we get underway, a massive thanks to Manscaped for sponsoring this video, more on them later. Now first up, this is probably the only bargain on the list, but it's still been going down exceptionally well so far, and that's the Yamaha R7. Don't be fooled into thinking that just because it's based upon the same platform as the MT-07, it's going to be a bit soft. The riding position is pretty aggressive with some clip-on bars and rear sets, and they've made loads of changes to the spec, like radially mounted brake calipers, an adjustable fork and shock, a slip assist clutch, and for the first time on the CP2 series of bikes, there's a quick shifter accessory available, although it is only on the upshift. Sure, it's only 70 odd horsepower from that little parallel twin, but for the money, you couldn't ask for much more. In fact, it looks so good that it's almost nudging the RS660 from Aprilia. Similar sized engines and similar in stature, the Aprilia just adds a little more spec and tech in order to justify the extra cash. It makes more like 100 horsepower, brakes are from Brembo, and you get a TFT dash, a full suite of lean sensitive rider aids, including wheelie control, 5 riding modes, cruise control, a quick shifter as standard, and it even gets cornering headlights. Now it's not totally new for 2022, but they did pretty well in the American Twins Cup last year, and so they've launched this completely unsubtle limited edition to celebrate. Not only do you get that stars and stripes livery, but also a bubble windscreen, single seat unit, and a reversed race shift pattern on the quick shifter. No price as of yet, but clearly it's going to be more than the 10.5 grand of the standard bike, and I reckon less than the next bike in this list. Now this one is actually American and not just painted like it, and it's the Benelli Hammerhead 1190. The brand has recently been revived, and although they say they've got all sorts in the works, including an adventure bike, the first new model they'll make available will be this. Now it's effectively an update to the 1190 RX made by EBR in 2016, but even by today's standards, it sounds pretty tasty. A big 1190cc V-twin that makes 185 horsepower at 10,600 RPM and 138 Nm of peak torque at a shade over 8,000. It gets a Showa big piston upside down fork, Showa shock, massive 386mm perimeter brake discs with equally massive 8-pot calipers. That's a bit of a signature feature of Buell's, and all in a package that weighs 190 kilograms wet without fuel, which ain't half bad either. I'd even say it's a pretty nice looking bike too. Not quite as aggressive and cutting edge as something like a Panigale, but the shark gills on the fairings and tank do give it some character, and the overall stance is pretty sweet. For similar money though, you could get a proven stalwart of the sports bike market, the Kawasaki ZX10R. No massive updates for 2022, but that's not such a bad thing. Its 998cc inline 4 still makes 200 horsepower at 13,200 RPM. That'd be on the dyno, but with the effects of ram air when it's on the move, it goes up to 210 horsepower. You also get Superbike derived Showa suspension, Brembo's M50 brake calipers on 330mm discs, their latest aerodynamic tweaks, a TFT dash with phone connectivity, power modes, cruise control, launch control, a quick shifter, cornering sensitive rider aids, and an eco riding indicator. Now Kawasaki say, in their own words, that the economical riding indicator is a mark appearing on the instrument panel to indicate favorable fuel consumption, encouraging fuel efficient riding. This is a bike that does 6 liters per 100 kilometers, so that's pretty thirsty, and if you're worrying about fuel consumption, then probably just buy a different bike like a Ninja 125. Anyway, new for 2022 is the paint basically. The green option stays pretty much the same, but the stealthy black gets a tweak with a new graphical design. Certainly looks alright to me, but nowhere near the astonishing beauty that is the new Triumph Speed Triple RR. Now the Speed Triple RS, so the more kind of naked version, was updated last year with a huge increase in power, as well as some decent weight savings, and I think you can now say the Speed Triple RS sits firmly in the super naked category. But Triumph had more up their sleeve, later announcing this RR version, which goes on sale for the 2022 model year. In fact, I believe they're showing up in dealers right now, and so I can't wait to swing a leg over one in a week or two. There are 3 main updates versus the RS DRS. So firstly, the almost cafe racer style fairing, which adds a little bit of wind protection, but also kind of transforms the styling into something that I think is much better looking. You've also got a more canted forward riding position, which will help you get down under that fairing. And then lastly, a boost to the suspension with the latest Öhlins semi-active electronic system. It should make it a little more supple when you're cruising around, but firm up when you do start cornering and accelerating and braking hard. And so it just adds a little bit more of that instant versatility. We've got a press bike coming in the next week or two, so keep your eyes peeled for a full review soon. Now, before we get onto the next bike, a massive thanks to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. Can you imagine how happy I am to have a male grooming product sponsor on board? I spend so much time nurturing this beard. Basically, they make a whole bunch of tools and formulations to help you keep looking your best, and their big one is their Performance Package 4.0, which basically gives you the works. Inside, you get their Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which with these guards is pretty ideal for sort of shaping up and trimming your beard. But it also uses their advanced skin-safe technology so that you can use it all over your body without fear of nicks and cuts. It's cordless with a wireless charging dock, it's waterproof so you can use it in the shower, and it also has a travel lock. If you triple tap that button, stops it going off in your bag and flattening the battery. Also in this pack, you get their Crop Preserver ball deodorant and their Crop Reviver ball toner spray. The Preserver's more like for all-day good smells, whereas the Reviver is more of a quick freshen up kind of product with cooling aloe vera. Also in this pack is their Weed Whacker 4.0, which is a nose and ear hair trimmer with a 360-degree blade. Importantly, this one gets the same skin-safe anti-nick design, because anyone who's done that and sort of caught inside their nose there knows that it hurts. So many great products in this package. You get a heck of a lot of features for your money, and also for a limited time, 2 free gifts. Firstly, the Shed travel bag to store it all neatly, and then also their anti-chafe Manscaped boxers. On top of that, head over to manscaped.com now and you'll get 20% off if you use the code MOTOBOB, and that's on top of those free gifts and free international shipping. Now back to the bikes, and another one coming up soon on the channel is the MV Agusta F3RR. In a couple of weeks' time, I'm going to be heading out to the MV factory for a tour. We'll do a couple of interviews and also ride on 2 of their new 2022 machines, including this absolute beauty. The fundamentals are pretty much the same as the standard F3, so a 798cc inline triple that makes 147 horsepower, nice and slender with 173 kilogram dry weight, the same frame, suspension, electronics package, all of which is top rate, but this one gets some carbon bodywork with some aero tweaks. So you get triple tier winglets to generate some extra downforce, a new carbon front mudguard with brake cooling ducts, a new lighter rear wheel, a new grippy seat covering, and some CNC machined foot pegs. Looks incredibly good, and I can't wait to do that trip and bring you a full review. Now, I told you this list would get expensive because we're already in the silly money, and we've still got 5 more bikes to go. First up, we've got the new Norton V4 SV, which was the first bike announced since the TVS takeover, and it looks pretty sweet. Norton, you know, a big historic British brand, if you didn't know already, was criminally mismanaged and run into the ground, and their flagship sports bikes were riddled with technical issues. TVS is a sort of Indian manufacturing giant, and they took over the remains of the company a couple of years back, and when they took a look at the bikes, they found 32 technical issues, 20 of which they say were critically dangerous. Stuff like leaky fuel tanks and hoses, and then oil pipes that could leak onto the back wheel, which is absolutely wild. So thankfully, TVS have been working away to take the best bits of those designs and then make them safe for public consumption. And the result should be pretty spicy. It's a 1200cc V4 that's good for 185 horsepower. You get the signature polished aluminium frame, an Öhlins NAX30 fork, Öhlins TTX GP monoshock, Brembo radial monoblock calipers on 330mm discs, forged aluminium wheels or carbon wheels on the black carbon edition, and then a competitive electronics package on top. Keyless ignition, a quick shifter, LED lighting, riding modes, an IMU, and even a rear-facing camera that shows up on the TFT dash. Now, they also recently announced a stunning cafe racer version of this bike, which you can find in my 2022 Best Naked Bikes, linked to down in the description, and I can't wait to see what else the TVS-owned incarnation of Norton come up with next. Over to KTM now, and we've got their super track-focused RC80, built in partnership with race specialist Kramer Motorcycles. and the goal was to build something without compromise on a hand-built chassis. Now it uses the 890 Duke's parallel twin as a base, but it gives it a new airbox, a Kropovich exhaust system, and also a new engine map to make 128 horsepower versus the 120 of the standard 890 Duke. Wrapped around it is a Kramer-designed steel trellis frame with a more aggressive geometry, and it's suspended on a WP Apex Pro fork and shock with full adjustability and more range of adjustability than you find on their standard setups. Brakes come from Brembo with their Stylema calipers and an adjustable radial master cylinder, and you've got lightweight Dimag wheels and fresh MotoGP inspired bodywork with carbon winglets. They've even moved the fuel tank, that's just a cover on the airbox now, and they've actually moved the tank under the seat, so like an Indian FTR or some of the old BMWs. Not only does that change the weight distribution, presumably for the better, but also it's strong enough to support the rider, so there's no need for an additional subframe. Almost everything about this bike is adjustable, so the bars, foot peg, headstock, fork offset, ride height, seat height, and it's super lightweight too, so 140 kilograms dry. Now look, they've already sold out, they only made 100, but 25 of those buyers could pay extra for a track experience with KTM factory racing at Jerez. You get riding tips with their pro riders, a special race package on the bike, some paddock stands, tyre warmers, a set of wets, pit mat, accommodation covered, pro video and photography. It really does sound like some experience, but like I said, that's on top of the 31 grand already required to buy the bike. Makes the 890 Duke R look like a complete bargain at 11 grand, and it really is one of the best road bikes, if not the best, that I've had the pleasure of riding. But about 30 grand seems to be the going rate for track-specific limited editions this year, like this one, the Yamaha R1 World Champs replica, built to celebrate Toprak Razgatlioglu's 2021 World Superbike Championship title. It's built by Crescent Racing Pro Shop, who've run the official Yamaha World Superbike project for the last 6 years, and this one's going to be limited to just 21 bikes. Now you're getting a Kropovich exhaust system and a dedicated race ECU, so that's 20 more horsepower on top of the standard bike, so up to 205 at the rear wheel. And there's all sorts of lightweight stuff too, like forged Marcazzini wheels, titanium fasteners, loads of race spec hardware, and so you lose a massive 26 kilograms versus the standard bike. And then there's upgraded Öhlins suspension, a racing brake system from Brembo, loads of racing spec hardware from GYTR, and then the full World Superbike livery. Yamaha must be feeling pretty generous though. You get a framed certificate, VIP pit box tickets to a 2022 World Superbike race with the chance to meet Toprak himself, and a coaching day at a UK circuit with Crescent Yamaha, and then some signed Toprak gear from his title-winning season. KTM will make you pay extra for all that sort of stuff. Next up, this one's a bit of a curveball. You see, Norton, that we just talked about, used to make some race bikes with rotary engines, and they were pretty successful too. Brian Crichton was behind the design, and he went on to set up his own company, Crichton Motorcycles, in 2013. Their latest creation is this beast, the CR700W, which, it has to be said, does have a little bit of Norton about it. But yeah, it's powered by a 690cc rotary engine built by third-party Rotron, and the power figures are pretty impressive. 220 horsepower at 10,500 RPM and 142 Newton meters of peak torque at 9,500. Now, rotary engines are super compact and lightweight despite those impressive performance figures, and so the whole bike comes in at just 129 kilograms dry. Crichton say that gives it a better power to weight ratio than an Aprilia RS4 and the supercharged Kawasaki H2R. Now again, this one is track specific and it gets the hardware to match, so top-notch Brembo brakes, a choice of Öhlins or Bichubo suspension, Dimag carbon wheels, and full slicks. Now, from what I can tell from the spec sheet, there's not a lot in the way of electronics on this bike, but I guess the point is a super focused track machine with a unique engine and top spec hardware. You'll need deep pockets to pay for it though. There'll be 25 made and they'll be 85 grand each plus VAT. For my international viewers, that's a sales tax here in the UK that currently runs at 20%, so it'll actually cost a private buyer £102,000. But I reckon you could top it, hypothetically anyway. You see, there's a new service from Ducati called Ducatiunica. It was announced earlier this year, and the idea is that they'll basically build a factory custom to your spec. The pics they've unleashed are pretty out there. Much more colourful and bling than you'd expect from Ducati with their typically flat red finish. And the idea is you'll go to their Centro Stile, which is their design centre, and then describe what you have in your mind and they'll create it. You can even visit multiple times to see the bike on its journey, and they say that the Unica bikes can involve precious metals, dedicated finishes, special colours, and Ducati performance accessories. Could it possibly run to more than 102 grand per bike though? Well, the most expensive bike they've produced in recent memory anyway is the Panigale V4 Superleggera. It's a ridiculously premium, extra lightweight take on the Panigale V4, and those were going for about 90 grand. So I reckon if you ask for something similar, but with your own paint job, some precious metals and all that stuff, you could probably top this list. And so that wraps up some of the most incredible bikes on the motorcycle market for 2022. As always, I'd love to know which one you'd like to take out for a spin down in the comments below. And if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and I'll catch you in the next one.